Good evening. If everybody could grab a seat, we'll get started. Excellent. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Matter. My name is Arun Bhatia, Senior Program Director here. Welcome all of you. Good crowd here tonight. I will just take a quick 2 minutes to do a quick welcome and then turn it over to our guest speaker tonight. How many of you have been to Matter before? Oh, wow, that's great. So glad to hear it. One of the things that you all know, having been here, is given our sort of portfolio of member companies and industry partners, we're really focused on collaboration and focused on making the right connections and helping our community learn as much as they can in specific areas. Last year we started, as many of you might have heard me talk about, immersion areas. These are strategic areas that we're particularly interested in, particularly focused on. One is health data, one is precision health, and the one that's relevant for this evening is healthy aging. So we started doing some programs last year in healthy aging, especially looking at care coordination technologies, care coordination inefficiencies, especially from acute to post-acute care. One of the things that we've been learning as we talk to our pharma partners, our health system partners, our payer partners, we all look at the patient as a disease in many instances. And one of the topics that came up was really thinking about sort of the healthy aging and the wellness aspect. And learning a little bit about not only tools and technologies that can enable that, but how do we better learn about the factors that drive healthy aging and wellness. And so it's been an ongoing learning process for us, and anytime we get a chance to hear from thought leaders and experts and folks that have been in this field for a long time, we always like to take the opportunity to do that. So we welcome Dr. Michael Roizen here this evening from the Cleveland Clinic. I will let Dr. Roizen share his background, but it was actually a bit of a surprise to me that he had actually spent 16 years here in Chicago at the University of Chicago. So a little bit of a welcome home, and glad you could make it here. A big thanks also to Dave Johnson from Foresight Health, who helped us put this program together and who will do some of the moderation towards the latter half of the program. So just a couple of logistics. In a group this size, we typically like to do social QA, which is an online platform we use for Q&A. So you'll see the address up here, matter.socialqa.com. You can go to that on your phone and on your tablet throughout the course of the presentation, submit your questions, they get upvoted, and Dave will help moderate that conversation as we go. Dr. Roizen will speak for about 30 minutes, share some slides, share some insights, and then we'll have a fireside chat with Dave to round out the program. Sound good? All right. Well, with that, I will get off the stage. Dr. Roizen, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'm going to talk about today is what we've done at the Cleveland Clinic and why we've done it. It started and is an experiment on saying, can we do what Obama wanted to do and why he wanted to do it, which is to bend the cost curve down, because without that, we will have social disruption. From a standpoint of Matter, I should say I have started 13 companies, 9 of which have been successful. The other 4 cost us a lot of money, but I learned a lot from it. And in fact, the first company that the University of Chicago attempted to commercialize, which we did successfully, we sold it to another company, and they got bought, and that company got bought, and it reverted back to the Cleveland Clinic, and we had no idea what to do with it then. So I learned a lot of lessons in the process of this beginning, if you will. But this is the curve that drives me and drove the Cleveland Clinic to start what we did. This is the Congressional Budget Office estimate of the next 70 years of health care and federal budget costs. As you can see, it goes from 2012 to 2082, and the blue line is all non-healthcare expenses, and that goes down as a percent of GDP over the next 70 years. The CBO estimates, assuming a 2.5% growth rate per year. This little blip here in 2030 is the Social Security baby boomer blip. You see how small that is, if you will, compared to the red line increasing. The red line increasing would say that we have to double our marginal tax rate by 2054 if we're to have the same deficit we have now. That's before the recent changes in tax. And that's because of this great growth rate in the red line, which is Medicare, Medicaid, the VA expenditures, and our expenditures on our own employees in the federal government. So that's what drove us to say this can't continue or the country will go either bankrupt or go to rationing. The US usually goes to rationing. The rest of the world does rationing by age, doable if the older people accept it. But the US does it by financial means. So you can't have that cancer drug, or in California, you can't have that hepatitis C drug unless you're about to die. And even then, you can't have it unless you're willing to go bankrupt. That would disrupt American society. So the Cleveland Clinic said, we've got to try and do this with our 101,000 employees and dependents, and to see if we can change this curve. That is, can we bend that curve? This curve is an underestimate, as I'll show you in a few minutes. I'm an academic, so I disclose my conflicts of interest. I did write these books, and I earn royalties on them. My real claim to fame, when Real Age came out, it displaced Harry Potter for 7 days as #1 on Amazon. Hold on, I got better. When You, the Owner's Manual came out, it displaced Harry Potter for 35 days. Harry Potter kept coming back. When You and a Diet came out, it displaced Harry Potter for 177 days. And I do still have, and I told you I helped start 13 companies, 2 of which I still have financial interest in and will mention in this talk. My other conflict, as you can see, I'm holding a brick. That's Roizen from Boston shooting a foul shot. I'm trying to distract him. He missed that foul shot. My wife gives me credit as we won that game by a couple points only. I did get to enjoy Michael Jordan during the Jordan years here, and I do get to enjoy LeBron James in both his careers in Cleveland. That's me in the. By the way, this one was the ESPN homepage for a day. This one Van Gundy talked about for 4 minutes because he said he liked the glasses. That's me trying to get young Mr. Green to miss his foul shot. He did not. That's why we lost that first game. The brick would have done better. The latest book is Age Proof, Living Longer Without Running Out of Money or Breaking a Hip, and you'll see how that fits in. Aging is obviously a worldwide concern. Veja is the national magazine of Brazil, and she, as you can see at the bottom, is concerned with aging. I've been on the cover 5 times. If you're a guy, you can't find me. I'm in the upper left corner. Didn't see me, did you? The reason I got involved in this was that when you look at the risks of surgery, and I'm both an anesthesiologist and internist, and I did that because I wanted to run an ICU, and to show you how long ago that is, they didn't have ICU training programs in that era. But if you look at it, the outcome of surgery is dependent largely on your age. That is, if you're undergoing a valve replacement and you're 75, everything else being equal with a 65-year-old, you have 3 times the risk of dying and complications. And the same thing with a 55-year-old, you have 9 times the risk. So I thought our job in the perioperative period was to try and help get people 10 years younger. And that's what we did, and that's what we still do. And that's one of the reasons why the University of Chicago and Cleveland Clinic's data were so good perioperatively, because we helped to make their patients, or our patients, younger. But that's how I got involved in this field of saying, could we change the rate of aging, and how important is that? And that led me into this wellness sphere. And the first thing I'm going to try and establish is that unless altered, healthcare costs will disrupt societies. This is the curve I showed you, but it's an underestimate, because the Congressional Budget Office only did 3 things. It took into account aging of the population, which was 62% of the slope of that curve, new technology, which was 17%, and the increased access of Obamacare, which was why they did the calculation of 21%. So the slope is largely determined on us getting older in their curve. But that's an underestimate, because they neglected the influx of chronic disease. And in America, chronic disease is growing 5 to 7-fold faster than the population. In fact, it is worldwide, because we were really effective and are really effective at exporting our bad habits. This is actually the curve. And what this means, and Obama knew this, and Trump knows this, is that we have to do something, because the crisis is 6 years away. That is, this is how fast chronic disease is gobbling up our financial resources in the world. You know this from dementia. We spent $216 billion on dementia care in the federal level 2 years ago. We will spend 5 to 7-fold greater than that by 2050. Same thing with diabetes. When I trained 2.2 million type 2 diabetics, we only had 1 hour in medical school. Recently, there were 37 million. We treated 18.9 million last year, spending 1.5% of our GDP. Not 1.5% of medical expenses, 1.5% of our GDP just on that group. And it's growing 5 to 7-fold faster than the population. Osteoarthritis, we did 67,000 hip and knee replacements in '74. Recently, the US has done 1 million, again growing 5 to 7-fold faster than the population and using up our income and resources. As I said before, this will disrupt America, because we ration not based on age or any scientific purpose, but based on financial ability to pay, and that is a disruptor. The second thing in this venture as we went towards wellness is that we know how to prevent the 80% of healthcare costs, because they're for chronic disease management. And if you looked at the data, that's where we started, if you will. 84% of all costs, the CDC says, and 67% of them are in the under 65 population, come from 4 things: tobacco, food choices and portion size, physical inactivity, and unmanaged stress. You notice none of those are inherent to us. We get to change any one of those that we want. And that's the joy of it, because that means that 84% of our costs are under each of our control. It started in September of '83. That's right, we can actually date. And a company that's near here, McDonald's, is the one that was responsible for a large part of that, because it established the culture that you could eat anytime, any place, anywhere, and it was okay. You could stop at McDonald's anytime, any place, anywhere, and it was okay. And it was on every corner. Our calories consumed were the same from 1858 to 1983. Adults in America consumed on average 2,360 plus or minus 40 calories in the yearly studies. But starting in September of '83, we ate 2% more yearly, compounded annually. So that in 1984, we ate 40 calories more, 1985, 80 calories more, 1986, 120 calories more, 1987, 160 calories more, et cetera. We stopped at 400 calories more per day per adult in America in 2000. We've gone down, we're only at 250 to 350. And physical activity decreased to 0 between 1990 and 2010 in 50% of Americans. What do we mean by 0 in the NIHANES database? It means you do less than 10 minutes of walking any day of the week. 50% of Americans now admit they walk less than 10 minutes any one day of the week, if you will. And it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man, doesn't matter whether you're employed or unemployed, doesn't matter whether you're Hispanic, Asian, et cetera. Blue lines are 1990, black lines are the number who say they do less than 10 minutes of activity any day of the week. The combination of those, our medical costs increase 50% on a relative basis. If they do that again, it will be 26 or 25 or 6%. It won't happen. We won't allow it because we will get rationing, which will disrupt society. By the way, our body mass index has increased 0.37% a year. That's 1.25 pounds per person, 5'7". So it means that the average 65-year-old of 5'7" now weighs 25 pounds more than the average 65-year-old who was 5'7" 20 years ago. So, second point, 80% of healthcare costs are for chronic disease management. Third point is we know how to prevent 80 to 90% of it, and our work with our 101,000 employees and dependents at the Cleveland Clinic and 9 other companies show you and we can radically decrease it. Why am I here? Because I can't do it alone. The Cleveland Clinic can't do it alone. All of us in this room are needed, plus many, many more, and I'll go and explain that. This was the Medicare database that largely Northwestern developed in its Chicago Public Employees Union's data analysis from 1946 to 2000. And Chicago did a wonderful job in this. If you do 5 behaviors in these 2 studies, you end up with only 10% of the risk of chronic disease of people who do even one of those behaviors or don't do even one of those behaviors. That was also confirmed in the Nurses' Health Study subsequently. Over 38 years, the 44 to 64-year-old nurses who did those behaviors had a 90% reduction in chronic disease. The problem with the best of the American, that is the people who should know best, our nurses, only 4% of them do those behaviors. Men were worse. Only 1% of us do it, 87% reduction in chronic disease in the 18 years of that study. And in the NIHANES database, if you look at it, if you say, let's say only 4 of the 5 behaviors, only 2.7% of us do those. And on entering Medicare at age 65, 0.6% of Americans do that. So why are we so expensive? Because we don't care about our health. You can, those are the data. I can't argue with the data. You can boo all you want, but you're booing yourselves. We're booing ourselves, if you will. And so we thought the most important question is, how do we get more people to do those behaviors? Most people don't even know that just adding extra virgin olive oil to their diet in replace of their normal fat decreases breast cancer risk by 62%. Just that switch. Most people don't know that if you have breast cancer and you do 30 minutes of physical activity and eat 2 fruits and vegetables a day, you decrease your breast cancer recurrence risk by over 60% in this randomized controlled study. And not just in this one, but in 5 other studies. It's very doable, and it's pretty damn easy. And the reason is you control which of your genes are on or not. This is a heat map. By the way, all genes do is make proteins or watch other genes. And if you look at it, this is a heat map. It's called a heat map. It's not showing well here, but if you look on the 2 side panels, these are 52 strips of genes from prostate cancer patients. And there they are a year later on the right side, and they're red. Red, it's called a heat map because it turns up red when those genes are active and producing proteins. And it turns green when they're inactive or turned off. And what did these 52 guys do? They took these genes, which are the RAS family of genes, which promote the growth of breast, colon, and prostate cancer, and took them from on to off. And how did they do that? What did they do? They did only 4 things. They walked 10,000 steps a day. They meditated 15 minutes morning and night. They eliminated 5 foods from their diet. And the 3 guys who smoked eliminated cigarettes or tobacco. And up here where the genes are off and turned on, those 2 produce the GSTM1 protein that cause breast, colon, and prostate cancer to commit suicide. So these guys, no medicine, lifestyle that anyone could do, even anyone in this room can do, turned the genes that promote the growth of breast, colon, and prostate cancer off and took the genes that promote the death of those cancers and turned them on. What you do by stress management, by physical activity, by choosing the right foods, by avoiding toxins like tobacco, is you change which of your genes are on or off. We don't yet change genes routinely, but you can change your gene functioning pretty easily. So we went at the Cleveland Clinic and said, could we encourage our employees by incentivizing them to get to 6 normals? So the Cleveland Clinic doesn't believe it can't measure behaviors. We didn't look at the behaviors as the Medicare and the Nurses' Health Study did. We said, let's go to outcomes. And we went to 6 outcomes: blood pressure, body mass index. It's not a normal body mass index. It's a body mass index that is at the level at which you start to develop chronic disease in a fairly significant fashion. Fasting blood sugar, LDL cholesterol, no cotinine or tobacco end products in the urine, and asthma under management, and then see a primary care provider and immunizations up to date. We've changed that 6+2 to replace the asthma with stress management, as we found that's probably the most important thing as we've worked with other companies. And you say, does this make a difference prospectively going forward? And the answer is, yeah. Our smoking rates decreased from 15.4 to 5.3%. That means our average employee gets 1.2 years younger. Our blood pressures stayed the same. Our body mass index has been going down 1 pound per year, 1.5 pounds per year, as opposed to the national average. It even has gone down in the employees not in the employee management program, not in the weight management program. And immunization rates went up substantially. You can look at it, how many of our employees and dependents of our 101,000 have gotten 6+2 normals. So in 2008, when we started this, it was 6% of our employees had that. That's the exact average in the United States for 47-year-old people, which was our workforce average. Those with chronic disease, 12% participated in a chronic disease management program, again, about the national average. What happened by last July? It was 40%, 42% actually, had 6+2 normals, and 63.8% participated in a chronic care program. As of last July, we keep pushing. It was 43.8% now have 6 normals, and 66.9% participate. I can tell you it's now 69.6% because we keep track of this pretty actively. And wait, hold on. You can boo me all you want, but no questions yet. You get plenty of time. Send them to poor Dave over here. This is the curve. The red line is the curve of national costs. The green is where we think we've gone to. And in fact, we think we've fallen off that green line in cost. If you look at it, early on, our CFO tried to get me fired because we weren't saving any money. We were just costing. In fact, he did it every quarter at board meetings. But our CEO stuck up for me, and he now says we have saved, this is the CFO's thing, $254 million off average cost over the last 3 years. And we'll save $150 to $170 million on our 101,000 employees and dependents this year. What? Anyway, the point is that this can make a major change. And it isn't unit cost. We pay ourselves more. Pharmaceuticals cost more. It's our utilization has gone down because people are healthier. So our per employee per month is not as big as the median. That's $150 million, $170 million a year. If you look at it for the national average, this is Kaiser's database for all employed people in America. The average cost has gone up $5,500 per year. That causes income inequality because the low income employee has to pay a lot more than the high income. In fact, over 100% of all income inequality can be associated with this delta change. Our employees, their cost has gone up $800 per year over that same period. In 2 of the last 3 years, it's gone down. If you look at participation, and I want to thank John Ellis in the audience here because he helped with this, we were having, and in fact, Black and African American employees do not sign up for wellness programs as much as others. And so he helped us figure out, although he doesn't actually know all of it, how to get this to a much higher level. This is the highest level ever recorded, in fact, for participation in an outcome-based wellness program. And by the way, it's in every group, Asian, Black, African American, Caucasian, Hispanic. We were able to do that by intense efforts. You can get, and we now have 69.6% as of the end of March participate in the program. So how many dependents now have it? By the way, I told you it's 43.8% and 69% participate. The participating employees get a reduction in their insurance rates. How much so? They're getting $42 million back this year. And since the program started, they've saved $254 million. In fact, for our average employee, if they put their savings in an HSA, work for us for 27 years, they end up with $200,000 more in their retirement at the time they retire. What's happened to absentee days? The absentee days have gone, the unexpected absentee days, sickness days, have gone from 1.07% to 0.77% in a steady fashion. That alone pays for more than the wellness program if all we did is replace the nurses. That is, if you say the docs at the Cleveland Clinic are useless, the administrators are useless, but we have to replace the nurses, that's really what medical care is. And by doing that, that would save us $7 million a year alone, just this absentee change. you have to change the culture. Oh, come on, I'm not even through the first part of the talk. I have a whole bunch on aging. You can come back some other time for that. Um, Culture change first and repeatedly message it. You can't get this without changing the culture. And our CEO, the first thing we did was say you can't smoke on campus. We got the city to we're 16 blocks by 5 blocks at our main campus. We got the city to put all those streets and all the sidewalks in that area as Cleveland Clinic. And we had our security force, which reported to the Wellness Institute, to patrol that. And you get a ticket if you're smoking. The second ticket you get if you're an employee is you're fired. No ifs, ands, and buts. We fired 2 high-profile surgeons, and we made it public, and they knew we were serious about this. And Toby stuck with it, our CEO, and he's really the one who made the culture change possible and happen. Aha moments. If that guy can do it, I can do it. Knock down barriers and make it free. The day we made smoking cessation program free rather than reimbursing it at 83 to 89%, 4 times as many people signed up that day as had signed up in the previous 4 years. Make it the easiest choice. So you can't buy a sugared beverage any place at any Cleveland Clinic site, whether it's in Abu Dhabi or Florida or Las Vegas or Toronto or in around Northeast Ohio. It's not that we don't say you can't bring a Coke in. You can, but we don't want to make it easy for you to get sick. We want to make it hard for you to get sick. Incent it big time and add a buddy. The buddy is the most important thing we found. That is, you will want to do something socially acceptable and work with your buddy. And then offer multiple programs. Weight Watchers works for 18.6% and Curves for 7%. Our e-coaching program for 32%. But when you add up 10 programs, you can get 70% of people to have an absolute normal BMI. We don't care what program it is. We just want to make it available to you and to get to the outcomes, because the outcomes are the important thing. And why does it work in this Dean Ornish slide? Because it's much easier if you turn off the faucet and much less expensive than to mop the floorboards and fix the floorboards. We've been fixing the floorboards by caring for people with type 2 diabetes and osteoarthritis and dementia instead of turning off the faucet. And we know how to turn off the faucet, and anyone can do it. If the United States did it, we wouldn't have a budget crisis. It would follow this green line. There wouldn't have to be social disruption. There wouldn't have to be rationing. And we could do a lot of things for other programs that all of us care about. That's how big this is. This isn't Cleveland Clinic trying to do it alone. It's got to be a World War II-like effort. This has to be a mission of the country, or we will have social disruption, and we've exported our bad habits elsewhere. The key points: unless altered, healthcare costs will disrupt societies. 80% in America and in the world are due for chronic disease management, and we know how to stop it. We've exported this to 9 other companies. This isn't unique to Cleveland Clinic. This can be done by anyone. I'm going to tell you, in my last thing, the most important thing you do is manage stress. And that's where I'm going to leave it, other than to say we are now living at levels of stress that when this curve was developed, the scale was developed, the perceived stress scale in 79 to 83 was associated with the development of chronic disease 5 years later. That is, this is the lowest group we have in perceived stress, 275 nurses at another institution. Nurses have the lower stress. Why? Because they don't worry about their financial future because they know they have a job. There's such a shortage of nurses. On the other hand, they have still very high levels of stress. This is 5 standard deviations above the mean of 79 to 83. We in America are living with high stress. And there are a lot of ways of managing it. This is the most common in America. it's not a successful way. So this is a program we have. There are many programs, but you can see that going through this 6-week program, a year later, people have normal levels. That's back in the normal range for 79 to 83. And if you will, and by the way, we do all kinds of tricks to get people to do it, including giving them, if you will, continuing education credits on it. And if you will, on the other hand, nurses have very high emotional exhaustion, and they get rid of a lot of it by going through the same stress management program. They also lose weight, and they get healthier in every other way, even if all they're doing is a stress management program. I'm going to leave it there, and Dave, come on up. We still have another half-hour of slides to go through on longevity, but we won't do that till later tonight.
Come back. Boy, wasn't that great? Let's give Mike another round of applause. Yeah, that was. Well, Arun didn't mention that I have an exalted title at Matter. I'm the author in residence, and I mention it for two reasons. One, I just think it's cool, and two, I've got a piece coming out next week that's titled "How Soccer Explains Healthcare," and that'll make sense here in a minute. Mike is clearly a basketball fan. Looks like an obnoxious basketball fan. And basketball is a classic strong link sport. You need superstars. LeBron James can get to the hoop anytime he wants. By contrast, and we're in the midst of the World Cup right now, soccer is a weak link sport. Teams are really only as good as their weakest player on the field. And that's because goals are very hard to come by. Mistakes are catastrophic, almost impossible to recover from. So weak link, strong link. To me, healthcare is a classic weak link enterprise. If we can prevent someone from needing an acute admission, like the way you described is happening at the clinic, and say, that's better than having the world's best surgeon operate on you, by definition. And yet, when you think about how we operate healthcare, it's much more of a strong link enterprise. All the money goes into sick care. We elevate the role of surgeons and others that are able to treat disease in very dramatic fashion. So I guess, Mike, the question where we start out here is, if healthcare is really a weak link enterprise and defense is as important or more important than offense, how do we get our healthcare system to think more about defense? How do we get better balance so that our preventive end is as good as our treatment end, our defense is as good as our offense?
You know, the question is, I don't know, other than it's a imperative for society. That is, without if all we do is do care, we don't have enough money to do care. We don't have enough money to do the care we would need and have anything else left in society. No money for education, no money for any of the social programs we care about. So it's an imperative. I think it's also an imperative for business. If employees get sicker and sicker, if you will, if it costs more for medical care, for insurance, you end up with nothing for the company to keep innovating and developing. So I think the reason you're seeing the combination of Berkshire, Amazon, and JP Morgan is because they're in desperate straits. And that's really why the Cleveland Clinic did it. We said we couldn't exist and keep innovating and keep having programs if we didn't do something to radically change our healthcare costs. Either that or we wouldn't be able to offer healthcare to our employees. So I think it's going to be forced on us. The fear I have is that if all of us don't join in doing the prevention that we can do in a World War II effort, meaning everyone understanding this has to be the culture, that then we will end up with rationing and more social inequality and more inability to, in fact, maneuver as a society. But as you saw that curve at the end, that green line goes at 7%, and that's very doable from the federal budget standpoint. That's very livable, and it means that we can have a lot of social programs that we care about. So it is doable, but we've got to, if you will, all of you, and have to be essentially missionaries in this, and do it for yourselves, but also you're the entrepreneurship of America. You've got to try and do this and spread this.
Yeah, so my opinion is we won't really change healthcare until we change the way we buy healthcare. But that also applies to the broader society, and gets to your last point. So McDonald's is experimenting with kale salads, not because they don't want to sell more burgers, but their customers are saying they want healthier menus.
Right, and I told the story before in our smaller group, so I hope you don't mind my telling it again. So every year, there's a guy named Bob Rich of Rich Foods. Rich Foods is the largest purveyor of foods to Walmart, of baked goods and other things, and to schools. And so that is elementary and middle and high schools. And so he's also chairman of the board of the Cleveland Clinic. And so I would go up to Bob Rich's home plant, which is in Buffalo, New York, and look in their experimental kitchen. And I was, every year, 2004, 2005, 2006, I'd go up there and I'd say, Bob, you've got to try to do healthier foods. We got to make this with whole grains, 100% whole grains, less cheese, you know. And he said, Mike, it's a fad. I'm not doing it. People won't buy it. And this last year, in March of 2017, it was like a breakthrough. Everything there was whole grain, and they were reduced, if you will, cheese and healthier. It was veggie pizzas. And I said, what's going on? And he said, Mike, it's no longer a fad. It's a trend. We're going to do it. So I have some hope. I'm going to tell a story about Let Us Entertain You as well. So when I was in Chicago, I started an executive health program, and we were lucky enough to treat a number of the executives at Let Us Entertain You. And I leaned on them, and in 1991, I got them to put hearts on menus at 5 of their restaurants, Tucci Milano, et cetera, for those of you who are here and old Chicagonians. What happened? Sales of the items that they put the hearts on went down 50%, actually more than 50%. So they quickly took them off 3 months later, and they said, Mike, it's a failure. People don't want to do this. I got them to try it again in, I think, 2003 or 4, and now there are hearts on all their menus, if you will, because sales went up after they put. We have changed. But we can't be as slow as we were with cigarettes. It's taken 60 years to get cigarettes from 46% down to 15%. If we're that slow with the rest of healthcare, we as a society will have a lot of disruption.
You know, Mike, there seems to be a lot of interest in your own diet among the audience. You want to just comment about how you live the...
I'm as Mediterranean as there can be with... so I don't eat 5 foods. Those are the 5 foods that are what we call the 5 food felons, because there's no redeeming merit. Added sugar, added syrups, simple carbs, anything that isn't 100% whole grain. Foods with saturated fat, not because of the saturated fat. We knew that foods with saturated fat were bad. We never knew why. 8 years ago, we found out why. It's because the carnitine, lecithin, and choline that's associated with foods with saturated fat, like red meat, egg yolks, cheese, change the bacteria inside your microbiome, inside you, to produce trimethylamine, which gets metabolized in you to trimethylamine oxide and butylbutane, which causes inflammation and is a greater risk factor than is a cholesterol of 260. That is, if you eat, no one would let an LDL of 260 untreated. You shouldn't have red meat, because more than 6 ounces a week will do that to cause more of a risk, probably more dementia and more cancer as well, because it impedes your immune system. So I don't eat foods with saturated fat. And then trans fat, we've now banned it, but it's a poison. So you should have banned it a while ago. So those are the 5 foods. Typical diet is plant-based, wine, chocolate, dark chocolate, walnuts, avocados, salmon, and ocean trout are my 2 animal foods.
All right, great.
Well, I'll give one more.
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't know if I can. So the best salmon in the world is wild salmon. You can get it at Costco, frozen, very inexpensively. I have no vested interest in Costco. If you buy salmon in the months of June 15th to August 15th, you get wild salmon even if you buy farm-raised by USDA DNA testing. If you buy wild salmon from August 15th to June 15th, you get farm-raised even by USDA DNA testing. Best is if you get the frozen salmon at Costco, that is wild, you get the wild year-round.
Okay. Well, you know,
I have no vested interest in Costco.
This audience booed you when you said there isn't commitment to health, but one of the most asked questions here is...
Well, 0.6% of you, when you get to 65, do 6 normal things. So 90, you are either in that 0.6%, or 99.6% of, or 99.4% of you are booing poorly.
So somebody here said, life is so short, or is so short, why should we worry about all this stuff? Somebody asked, this is anonymous questions, right?
Well, in fact, and I would show you this in the slide presentation as well, but we're on the cusp of a longevity revolution or a longevity disruptor. If you make it to 2030 with more than a 90% chance, you're going to make it well past 110. We're going to change, because we've learned how to turn white fat into brown fat, which metabolizes stuff. We've learned how to do an embryonic reboot in dogs, taking 17-year-old dogs. We've now, in the last week, taken 8 dogs between, not we, MIT and Harvard, that have taken 8 dogs between the ages of 15 and 20 in their actual age and made them 2-year-old dogs. We can do an embryonic reboot, and it's going to happen. And the reason you want to be healthy is you want to be prepared for that embryonic reboot, so you're going to get to live longer and healthier and enjoy it, because you're going to get that opportunity if you want it. And I wouldn't want to be disabled for 40 years.
Well, you just never know what's going to be on these things. So
I'm sorry, but that's the next part of the slide. Next part of the talk, I go over, there are 14 areas of longevity research where we are seeing breakthroughs that really mean that if we can translate that animal data to humans, you're going to have, and people say, I don't want to live longer. Remember when people in 1900 were saying the same thing when they were 47. Yet by 2000, we were living on average 78. And the economy grew 10,000-fold, and the lowest person in the middle class lived better than the richest person in 1928. That is, lived better than J.D. Rockefeller, worth the equivalent of $30 billion now. That's where we live. We've improved the quality of life tremendously, and we will be able to do that if we're prepared for it and if we don't get social disruption in the meantime.
Well, should we invite Mike back to talk about longevity? Yeah, okay. So you got to come back now. Here's a name I have not thought about in at least 30 years, Earl Butz, who was Secretary of Agriculture in the Nixon administration. He got fired when he commented on the Pope's Paul's encyclical on birth control. He no play of the game. He no play of the game. He no make of the rules. He got fired. So this person wanted to know, and several others.
Don't tell that to Trump. He'll come out with it tomorrow.
Oh boy. They want to know what the government's role is in promoting chronic disease. I mean, on the one hand, the Department of Agriculture publishes the food pyramid and healthy diets, but on the other hand, Earl Butz and agricultural subsidies, cars and highways over mass transit and walking, lack of sidewalks, et cetera. What could the government be doing to promote what you're saying?
You know, Bloomberg is the one who did this first in New York City and changed, if you will, got rid of trans fat, and then Philadelphia has a sugar tax. I don't know if you guys know what's happened in Philadelphia, but they put in a 20% sugared beverage tax. Sugared beverages sales have fallen 24%, and water sales have gone up 30%. So I believe, and we know that cigarettes, as you increase tax, by the way, the current cigarette taxes average in America pays for 15%, 1/7 of the medical cost. So if you fully, if you will, account for the cost of these things in tax, in some way of changing their prices, whether you call it a tax or something else, I think government has a role in at least strongly educating us, and I believe that you know, we're at a crisis level, and just like in World War II, and for those of you who are old enough to know something about World War II or study it, we changed the way the whole society functioned by a culture change and a voluntary participation in Rosie Riveter, et cetera, but we changed everything, and that's what we really need to do from a health standpoint, and I think government has a major role in helping us with that.
Yeah, and maybe pick up there, because the question most asked by the audience has to do with health equity, and you know, you can go 2 miles from here and life expectancy is 20 years lower. You were talking about longevity a second ago, and the real potential or the frontier for dramatically changing our lives, but the reality on the ground today in lower economic neighborhoods is really going the opposite direction. So healthy choices are easier for people with money, like many of your employees, although I'd argue in healthcare, when you look at kitchen workers and custodians and so on, they are not wealthy people. So how do we achieve health equity? And maybe you can put it in the context of the clinic a little bit about how you've been able to work with all levels of the economic spectrum.
Yeah, so we do work with all levels of the economic spectrum to get to 6 normals, and obviously the lower level employee gets a higher percentage increase in their net take-home pay by doing healthy things. But I want to come. One of the reasons the budget is so squeezed and that we can't do things as much in education and other things is we're spending so much money on health care. And the reason we're spending so much money on health care is 0.6% of us cut into Medicaid, Medicare, if you will, healthy. And so we spend a ton on us old folks. And we spend a ton on people who are veterans. And we spend a ton on people, everybody we're spending it on. And the reason is because we aren't, if you will, taking care of our own health. Now, you guys may think all of you are taking care of your own health, and maybe you are, but you're in the vast minority if you are. And if you go to O'Hare Airport or Midway and take a tape measure and measure the wastes, you will see that they are different than you're calculating them to be if you're saying their body mass index is normal. We are not healthy as a society, and if we spend money on that, which is what we're doing, we don't have it to help people get the education and get the other services in poverty they need to be able to get out of poverty and to have a longer life expectancy.
We really need to turn you into a soccer fan, because the better defense wins games. But
I don't know enough about the soccer analogy, so I apologize.
I got to say the brick wouldn't work. Let's end on a positive note.
Well, wait a second.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a positive note. If you get to 6 normals, you're going to save a ton of money for society. And I want everyone here to get to 6 normals and promote it.
So let's end on a stratospherically high note because it's been so positive up to this point. Um, so why don't you talk to us about which companies are doing a great job on wellness?
I don't think.
Types of companies.
No, I don't think I'm in the position to do that, because I think if you look at it, there are a huge number of efforts that aren't outcome-based. And it is only the outcome-based. That is, you've got to get in the Medicare database, in the Nurses' Health Study, in our own studies, it is either you have to have the behaviors that you can track, or better yet is to get to the outcome values. Okay. And so if I was going to say who's doing a good job, it's those who are getting to the outcomes.
Okay. Well, this is like a horse race. These questions come up from the back and lead. So I'll just a short one, but there's a huge amount of interest in the stress program that you're using to get the results. So you maybe just...
So anyone can go and get it. It's called Stress Free Now at the Cleveland Clinic. We charge for it. There are a whole mess of stress programs that are available without charge. We do a coaching for it. So the reason we get such good results is we have e-coaching with it. Without it, about 30% will complete the program. With it, about 84%. That was intention to treat analysis I showed you for all 275 of the nurses. So even the ones who didn't complete the program, their data were in there to show you their stress levels. So I strongly believe in doing some program, but it isn't, again, it isn't rocket science, whether you learn meditation or guided imagery or progressive muscle relaxation or deep breathing, whatever works for you to be able to manage stress. So stress is not something that is done to you. It is your response to something. And you can control that response. And that, I believe, our data would say, gives you the fastest return on investment, the greatest chance of, and the fastest way of getting more health. Works much faster, believe it or not, than cigarette cessation or getting a normal blood pressure, normal cholesterol. But it is, all of those are important, and any one of those will cause that goal to be scored, if I can use that soccer analogy. But the key is learning that first and then adding to it and getting a buddy to help you. The buddy should be a woman. Guys are lousy buddies. Women are great buddies. So women should have women as buddies. Men should have women as buddies.
Let's end on that. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike and Dave. Appreciate it. A couple quick things just as we wrap up. So I mentioned this was part of our...
I have a payment that I want from this. I need, if I can get further on, I'm going to quickly go through a bunch of slides, because I want you to vote on this. This is a vote on the cover of the next book. So there's a 1 and a 2, and I want to see your hands. 1 is a white, forget the food on there, that's just, those are placeholders. We love luscious food, red wine and dark chocolate, etc., avocados. But do you like the white background with green or yellow? Hold on. I want to see all of those in favor of the white background. All of those in favor of the yellow background. The yellow wins. Thank you.
If that's the only payment we have to make, that's great. Thank you. So I mentioned, this is part of our series of healthy aging that we're doing here at Matter. As you guys are, as you're interested in it, as you want to engage more, please feel free to reach out. We'll share more about what we're doing later this year. I know there were some, boos and hisses and things during the audience. I think it's great. I joke with our team here that, I spent 6 years in a corporate strategy group, and we all thought alike, had the same perspective on everything. So this is really important that we hear different perspectives and challenge our thinking. So Dr. Roizen, thank you very much for that. And a huge thanks to our team as well, our events team, our staff, service delivery, our marketing team. A lot of these programs don't happen without their help, so thank you guys very much. And thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it.